For the past several days, delegates of the National Education Association have been meeting for their 101st Representative Assembly, their first in-person gathering since COVID. And the association's president, Becky Pringle, as well as the vice president, Kamala Harris, made it clear this week that they are infuriated and finished with conservatives and what they've been doing in D.C. and at school board meetings across the nation.
These so-called leaders have tried to make you pawns of their political agenda, because while you work hard to inspire the dreams and ambitions of our next generation, they dare question your dedication, your motivation, and your value.
That, of course, was the vice president, Kamala Harris. Becky Pringle was even more in your face with her comments.
We will say gay, we will say trans, we will use the words that validate our students and their families, words that encourage them to walk in their authenticity, to love themselves fully, to become who they are meant to be.
And we will say that's why parents need to be involved and remove this type of indoctrination from classrooms. Look, they need to know that conservatives will not stop fighting for this nation and for our children, not theirs, our children. Joining me now to talk about the battle in the classroom is FRC Senior Fellow for Education Studies, Meg Kilgannon, who served at the U.S. Department of Education under President Trump. Meg, thanks for joining me. Welcome back to the program.
Thanks for having me, Tony.
I assume you were not at the convention yesterday?
I missed it. It seems like they were full of themselves as it was without me.
I want to unpack some of the things that came out of the NEA's assembly, which concludes today. Let's start with remarks of the association's president. We just heard Becky Pringle. She went on to talk about decisions on school prayer that attack religious freedom, vouchers that threaten the right to a universal public education, the long-term devastating impact of the Supreme Court's decision to hijack the fundamental freedom to decide, and I'm quoting, for ourselves when and how to have a family. I mean, all right, I thought they were talking about education in the classroom. What is all this?
Well, this is the proof, if there was any doubt left, and I don't know how there could be, but if there was any doubt left that this organization has a left-leaning political agenda that they are very proud of and that they will support to the bitter end, this is it. I mean, her speech in particular set the tone for the entire event, and the business items that they're going through now that the delegates have put forward for a vote. I noticed in the speech, in the B-roll footage there, not all the teachers were standing and applauding for President Pringle when she said that we will say gay, we will say trans. But this is an incredibly partisan organization that has a lot of muscle, and they use it on behalf of their friends in the Democratic Party.
But is it, I'm actually glad that they're out there saying these things, because I'd rather it be open so we can actually look at what they're saying and what they're, I mean, if they're saying this in public, what are they doing in the classrooms? I mean,
right.
I think this should be a warning sign to all Americans that education is in serious trouble in America. In fact, I think we would be better off, and I'm probably going to be criticized for this, but I think we'd be better off just pulling the plug on public education, giving kids a book, teaching them to read, and skipping all this other nonsense.
Well, I do think we need to be very serious in assessing what it is our public dollars are funding. The dues that are received by the National Education Association come from the salaries of the teachers who pay those dues, and then that money comes straight out of the pocket of the taxpayer. So what you have here is an elaborate sort of money laundering operation that's giving public dollars to left-wing interest groups. And this is not an acceptable state of affairs.
But there's this disdain for, number one, elected representatives. You heard this from Kamala Harris, these so-called leaders. And then you have a disdain for parents who are getting involved because they don't want their children being indoctrinated with the critical race theory and all this gender confusion that's being pumped into the classrooms.
Right. I mean, this language from the vice president about teachers being used as political pawns for our agenda as conservatives. I mean, we watched during the pandemic when our children were used as pawns in the the battle over COVID, the politicization that whole situation got into, and this idea that somehow it's us who are politicizing things. I mean, this is always the claim, right? But we're just defending ourselves. It's
Right.
the leftist progressive political agenda that's being pushed on children at the expense of their education, at the expense of the math, reading, science that we want them to learn. This is the problem. This is what has so many parents up in arms, and I hope that they continue to make their voices heard.
Meg, very quickly before we run out of time, I know we were talking about the rhetoric that they use. It's inflammatory rhetoric, and I think it exposes their true agenda. But what are actually some of the things they passed in this assembly that they had?
Some of the things they considered are really, really partisan. They had something about the intersection of climate justice and environmental racism, for example, was one of their new business items. They expressed a need to address systemic homophobia and transphobia in the schools. And I would say if it's systemic, then that's their problem because they're the ones running the system. And the need to amend or adjust standards in economics and personal finance classes, where you think your kid might be safe, to include historical reasons for the racial wealth gap in the U.S. This is politics.
Yeah. Well, the good news is parents are getting involved in school board races across the country, and that has them scared to death. Very quickly, we've got a resource for parents. Where can they find it?
At www.frcaction.org/schools. Lots there to get involved.
All right. Meg Kilgannon, always great to talk with you. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Thanks so much for having me, Tony.